Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Build Your Copywriting Business podcast. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello. So today, Kate and I are joined by Susie Tomenchok, who is a negotiation guru. And I know that for a lot of us, which we're going to dig into, but for a lot of us, yes, pricing is challenging, but even above and beyond that, the idea of negotiating freaks us out. So Susie's here to help us out with that today and make it a little bit more, if not completely easy, at least a little bit more manageable, a little bit less scary. So Susie, thank you for being here.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here. I'd love to talk about this topic, and it's not foreign to people that negotiation just has a stigma. So really excited about it.
Yay, awesome. And actually really before I'm so tempted to just jump right into it, but how did you get to become a negotiation coach, a negotiation guru?
Yeah. So I was an executive with Comcast doing B2B negotiations for pretty big technology deals. And it just finally occurred to me that the things that I did kind of in the boardroom, it was happening all the time, every day. I have 3 girls and I started seeing them emulate me in like day to day, a target strategy at Target. They could get anything they wanted because they knew timing and framing. And it was just so interesting to me. And I started realizing that it happens all the time. And so I thought, gosh, if people could understand the strategies and tactics that happen every day, practice them, just in everyday occurrences, they'll get more. And then when the stakes are high, they'll be ready. So I just have a lot of passion around it. I saw it work in kind of those very sophisticated or formal environments, and then saw that success kind of bleed out into every day. So that's kind of where my path came from.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, and so I do definitely think that most people think of negotiations being in that moment of I'm negotiating my rates or I'm negotiating my salary, that kind of thing. But where are these instances where you see it happening outside of those kinds of discussions?
Yeah. When you really just think about a conversation and every day, Carnegie Mellon in their PhD program, they have their students for the first semester try to negotiate in any possible scenario. Get asking for a little bit more at the deli, going to the grocery store, and just just advocating or just being curious and asking for more. And the only place that people couldn't find additional value is the gas station. So when you think about that context, we negotiate all the time. It's about just 2 parties trying to find a win-win, basically. And when we push through, we get so uncomfortable with no, or we have these things in our mind that kind of limit us into kind of pushing beyond. And even when we feel like we're in the game, it's just like staying in, we're really quickly to retreat. But when you think about it from that aspect, that it's happening around you, in fact, sometimes happening when you're not even realizing it's happening to you. When you just have those optics or you open up your eyes to that, you can see it happening around you. And then when you think about it or reframe it for yourself, that you're advocating for yourself or just trying to find value for both parties, it just kind of relieves that pressure a little bit more, if that makes sense.
I love that idea of practicing negotiating, practicing asking for more than they're going to give you. They naturally would give you, but pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. And I'm sitting here thinking like, oh, if I went into Starbucks, would I be brave enough to say, hey, can I get some extra whipped cream? And can I get that for free? It was such a silly little thing, but there's still that element of, oh, I don't want to bother anyone. And I don't want to, I know that it wouldn't normally be free. So why should it be free for me?
So true.
Where do you think these hangups come from? Why do you think it is so hard for us to hear no or to ask for something more?
Yeah, I think we're socialized that way. Even when you think about, a simple example is when you call down to get an extended on your hotel room just for some time, the person on the other side has kind of been conditioned to just say no. And so most people go, okay, no, I asked, thank you very much, hang up.
Mhm.
But when you push just a little bit, like really, maybe just 30 minutes, is there anything you can do for me? And try to just get a little more creative, that kind of backs them down. So it's just this automatic response that happens. And a lot of times, there's a lot of gender research. I'm not going to say I'm an expert on it, but a lot of times women tend to expect things to just them be rewarded for what they've done. And so there's some thought around that social conditioning that we have, where men just stereotypically tend to ask for more or just kind of see their everyday as an opportunity for negotiation. So a little bit is kind of how we were brought up, and just like not realizing or kind of not wanting to be like, I think you said it really well. I don't want to be that person that asks for more whipped cream, or
Mhm.
here
Mhm.
she comes again, that woman that always asks for more whipped cream. So we have to kind of get beyond that and think too, when those people are used to negotiating or they're used to those customers, you're not somebody that's foreign to them
Mhm.
or, like
Mhm.
different than anyone else.
Yeah, that's interesting. The idea of women, especially. I'm sure it does go across genders, but just expecting that if we do a good job, people recognize us and give us things.
Mhm.
I definitely see that a lot. And I was actually just listening to a podcast the other day, and someone was saying that some of the best career advice she got was that you can't just expect people are going to recognize you for what you've done and
Mm.
reward you for it. You have to go and ask for it.
Mhm.
Which it's so funny because I do think it's the exact opposite of what a lot of us expect. If we're all good and we work hard,
Yeah.
then we'll be given. But it apparently that's actually
It's
not
not
how
the way the
it
world
works.
works. Well, and it's funny because we are living in our world. So we think that, everybody's thinking about us. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's about reminding somebody around you, like, hey, listen, I just finished this project, or, my value is this. And they're like, oh, you're right. It's not that they're always thinking, no, not for you. It's just that you're kind of bringing it up to them,
Mhm.
opening up their consciousness about your value.
Yeah. I think then too, there's that element of, well, I don't want to toot my own horn. I don't want
Mhm.
anybody to think that I'm bragging, which is, it's kind of silly when you think about it, like to go to your boss and say, hey, we just did this great job on this project and I headed this up. But you could absolutely see how people would think of that as, I want to brag to my boss. And
Yeah.
yeah, just
Yeah.
what makes it that distinction between actually bragging and just saying, hey, I'm letting you know that I did a good job.
Just asking, one thing that I talk to my groups about is just taking the first step. And one thing is just asking more, just being curious, just looking at it like, what if, and just putting it out there. And so the more you do that, or the more you frame that, that's just going to naturally bring these, kind of ahas, or just getting, if you think about it like that too, is that you're enlightening that person to think about something that they may not have thought about,
Mm-hmm.
something that's important to you. If you're negotiating a salary or a deal, that other person, they might not be aware of something that's really important to you, that's easy for them to give, but it feels to us so like such a big thing. And we just need to understand, or just have our curiosity around, we all think differently. And so I just want to understand where you're coming from. And that alone kind of breaks us out of our fixed mindset. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what it's about, is changing that fixed mindset. And when you think about it, so here's my question for you guys. When you think of negotiation, like what makes you nervous? Is it negotiating for a car? Is it negotiating for yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you feel most comfortable when it's negotiating for other people? Like, where have you, if you think about when did I really negotiate well, where is that? And where is kind of that, ugh, I hate
That's
that.
such a great question, because I remember
good question.
a friend of mine was talking about how she had to go get a new car, and the guy at the dealership is kind of giving her a hard time. So she brought her husband along, and he ended up being just a total dud, no help at all. And I said, "Oh my God, you should have brought me along. I'd have no problem being like, nope, this won't do it.
No, yeah.
Go back and get
Yep.
another number." But I've been thinking about getting a new car myself, and I'm dragging my feet because I don't want to go in.
Email them.
Oh,
That's what I did last time. I emailed a dealership and then they told me a quote, and I emailed another dealership, said, hey, this one. And I just sat through email. And so when I went in, I had the quote, and this was like 10 years ago now, but so I don't know if it still work, but that was the best. Then I could hold my ground. I was like, nope, I have this number from your person. And if you can't give me this deal, then I'm going to go somewhere else. So that idea of like, I think about it, we were lucky enough to go to Morocco once, and it was that very much that haggling culture.
mhm.
Yeah.
And so is setting that boundary of like, nope, this is when I'm going to walk away. If they can't do this, this is I'm not going to, having those boundaries.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm comfortable with that situation. So it's funny to hear you say that, but I think it is easier, definitely, when you said, I think both of our eyes lit up when you said negotiating for someone else, because for whatever reason, and maybe, that's a lot easier to, I think about it with like your hotel example, or asking a restaurant, hey, it's our anniversary. Is there anything you can do, for us, or things like that. And that feels, it's my husband's birthday. Is there anything you can do for him? And that feels like, okay, I'm asking for him. It's not for me. So it feels less selfish, I guess, is what I'm talking my way into.
Yeah. The research does show that, especially for women, advocating for somebody else or advocating for the team. So if you can reframe your ask, if you find that that's your answer, how do you reframe it so it's not just for you?
Yeah.
So that you have more power around it. And you also touched on something else. Ambiguity is difficult for some people. Having like a clear, like if you tell me this role or this project, like if you're like for your audience and they have quotes that go out, if they know the market value of who they are is this number, they're more likely to have vigor around or confidence around really asking for it.
Yeah.
And you also, Kate, pointed out something else is anchoring. I think is really one of those things I love to teach people to do in the moment or like every day. It's just kind of subtly saying, well, I've done a project like this before. And it was like in the range of $30,000, just having to, I've said that at the beginning, kind of setting expectations, just kind of gauging how do you think about that? Because the hardest thing is just getting where are they in their head so that you can kind of go from there and not being so afraid of it, waiting for the last minute, or you just want to send it in a document because you're so nervous about it.
Yeah.
So getting comfortable with that conversation is really the key.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really interesting tactic to include. We talk to our students about, you don't have to quote them a price in the call, which you're not saying that they have to quote a price in the call, but I love that idea of being able to say, oh yeah, I did a project similar to this. It'll be a little bit different. I do want to look at my notes and go through and to get you the exact quote, but the project similar came to, XYZ amount. Does that sound like it's in the ballpark for you? Yeah. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And then it gives them an opportunity to not kind of like save face too, where they're like, oh, our budgets are really, tight right now. Could we, I know that's your, or it kind of opens up that conversation because, the other side doesn't like to negotiate either. A lot of times they're really nervous about the number or there's a personal relationship and that, money can just be, just one of those things that's really hard. So the more you can open that up and say, listen, I just like to put this out here and have the conversation, that just kind of makes everybody feel comfortable. That's the goal.
Yeah, exactly. And for the freelancer, when we know what their budget is, it's so much more like, first of all, either yes, that's possible, or no, I've run my numbers. And if I were to do that work for that price, it's not feasible. You're going to have to find somebody else. But when you know what their actual budget is, it takes off so much pressure.
Totally. And you just brought up something that's super important is because of what I said about ambiguity. I have a hard time saying that word.
It's a tough one. Ambiguity. That's
So
a tough one.
I just tried to go really quick so you just don't notice, but I have to point it out. Is really understanding that floor and ceiling and being okay. Of course, if they give you more than you expect, you might take it. Just say yes, but that floor and knowing when to walk away. And being okay with that. You just need to, as a business owner, get really comfortable with your numbers. Talk to people about it, understand your market rate, just get really, really clear. And there's no harm, no foul. If they can't meet that budget, just say, listen, and next time, or keep me in mind, but let me help you find somebody else. Don't lose the relationship, but be really clear on that and be okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I'm curious from the opposite side of that, because I think a lot of people do a lot of mental gymnastics when it comes to financial numbers, particularly with, they accepted my quote. Was that too low now? Does that mean they have more budget? And should I go higher next time? And what's your advice for getting through that sort of internal back and forth?
Yeah, such a good question. So that's why it's so important to just be really comfortable with your floor and ceiling. And some people like to have that reconciliation. Some people because it can drive you crazy. Just know, but look at it really objectively. So take it as data. And if you know you were off, know next time, and take that as confidence to move you forward so that you cannot get stuck in it. Don't let it get emotional. Look at it objectively. And just as long as you're in that comfort zone, you're good. But I will say, don't ever say yes to their first offer where they put something out there. And the reason not only because there's more opportunity, and you can ask, is that number firm? Is there any more, if you want to push a little bit, they say going back and forth maybe 3 times if you're in a negotiation is enough, and being very clear on that. But just having that clarity. And don't say yes right away, because if you think about it, if you say yes right away because it was such a good offer, you're hurting them. Then they feel like they went too high. So when you think about the ego of the other side, say, hey, let me think about that, or just let me take time, or, kind of that way they don't feel that same feeling that you expressed of, I shouldn't have gone out with that number.
That's
so it
so
helps
interesting.
Yeah. So you have to think about both sides. That's a good way of framing it too. You're honoring both sides of, you want them to feel good about it. Negotiation started in the 60s and 70s, and lawyers, that's where you first, and then, so it was all about the kill and who's going to win. And then it became more of an MBA, and, and now it's really talked about, really it's a win-win. And you do want to get what you want, but you want both parties not to feel like they were slighted, because that's not long-term relationship oriented, right?
Yeah.
That's really important.
Yeah. Well, and as someone who we're hiring now, and as someone who has hired people in the past for other companies I've worked for, I think that we forget on the other side of it when we're interviewing for a position, like an on-staff position, that number, that salary number was I don't know, how about this salary? It's very rare that number has to be the number. I mean, sometimes there's some fields hospitals where they have it in a range, or universities where it has to be in a range. But for the most part, most private companies, they kind of went, this feels like a goodish number. Let's see if people respond to it, and are very open to people coming back and saying, well, this doesn't work. Is there some wiggle room? And then they can have that conversation. That number is really intended as the initial conversation point, kind of a ballpark kind of area.
Yeah. A place to start.
You expect it, right? So you expect it to happen, that it's not going to be here's the number and then that's it, and the conversation doesn't happen, right?
Yeah. Yeah. As a starting point, just no. When you hear no, if you can recondition yourself as that's not the end, it's the start. Okay, where do we go from here? And getting used to that kind of hearing no, or understanding those, and just kind of pushing beyond.
Well, and it's like how you were saying that the other person is just as uncomfortable with
Mhm.
negotiation. So when they say no, it may just be because that's the only thing that they know to say, versus this doesn't work for us. How can we
Mhm.
have a further discussion? Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. And to add on to that, this is interesting research too, is when we hear no always. And a lot of times they don't articulate the conditions around that. And so what happens sometimes psychologically to that person is the next time you ask, they're more likely to say yes, because it wasn't that they wanted to say no. There were reasons why in that moment. So it's important to like have the courage to ask again. And so that too kind of gives us a little bit more comfort
Yeah.
with that no. And like you said, that context is so important. And that curiosity, right? It comes up again. How do you get more curious to understand help me understand that no? Like, that's not mean, or, like, help me understand, is it the timing? Is it the price too high? Like, what is it that is leading you to that? Give me more context. Feedback's great.
Yes, I love that. And when we teach our students too, even when, if you're interviewing for a job and they do say, thanks so much, we've gone with somebody else, to not even let that be the end of the conversation. At the very least, say, thank you so much. This is a great experience. Can you give me any feedback to help make me a better candidate for the future? I think we forget that it's totally in our rights at any time to ask for more context, for more information, for more feedback.
Yeah, and making it really welcoming. I love the way you framed that, because they feel bad too. And they don't want to, they're just like, oh, it's just like hard for them too. So make it really easy. Make sure you're really open to hearing that feedback so that they are welcome to give it to you.
Yeah. 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 Because no is such it closes up the conversation, and you can reopen it by just asking a few more questions. And quite frankly, if someone it refuses to ask any more questions, you probably dodged a bullet there anyway, because they sound like terrible people to work with. But yeah, to be able to say, all right, okay, I heard the no, definitely. Can I just ask a few more questions about how this might be possible in the future, or what I could have changed to get a yes from you in this scenario?
Yeah. Exactly. Another one, so that's asking and getting comfortable with no. And the other thing is silence. Silence is so powerful. And if you can really, just think about it as giving space to the other side, or saying, when we're really nervous, we will tend to talk too much. And people on the other side use silence as a strategy. I talked to a defense attorney, and she said, silence is my thing. The only time it doesn't work is when it's somebody else's offense, So she said there was another lawyer that they were both using silence. So they just kind of stayed there awkwardly until they finally said, okay, it's not going to work this time.
It's the most boring episode of Law and Order ever.
Exactly.
Silence for an hour.
But powerful.
Powerful.
So, but just if you think about it, trying it with somebody you love, the normal cadence of our conversation and how we automatically fill these things, or how one of us is more of a talker and the other one's not, we get used to these formula conversations. And if you insert silence, it's so fascinating to see how it changes the cadence of somebody that but it really, really enlightens you on what's in the head of the other person if you just let it linger a little. It's hard.
It's so interesting. Yeah. Well, I'm imagining that, practicing that conversation with someone you love or someone you close to, because to ask a more difficult question, like, so what are you feeling right now? Or what are you thinking right now? I could absolutely see myself, and I'm sure lots of other people going, what are you thinking right now? Because I was just thinking that you might be thinking this, and
Yes.
versus asking and then just zipping it up,
Yes. In fact, I tell people, if you're going to put out a number verbally and you're on the phone, practice saying it and stopping when you're done. Even if it's like this number that is crazy high that you don't even press mute. or do something like practice stopping,
Mm-hmm.
because it is that intentional. When you're that, stressed out, it's hard to stop.
Yes.
So practicing the silence in that moment. I remember I did a deal with Viacom, and it was a 8.6. I'll never forget for this. And we both parties knew there was absolutely no value on the table. It was a renegotiation of contract. So I had to practice $8.6 million. And I just practiced over and over. I remember I still feel the silence. I still can feel the heat. It felt like forever. I got in there finally at the end of the whole thing. Okay. And the price annually will be $8.6 million. And it felt like an eternity. And they did kind of laugh like, that's ridiculous, and had this, horrible response. But it helped me understand where they were coming from. It was so good to do. And it gives you confidence. It shows your confidence, even though it doesn't feel like it to you, but it shows your confidence.
That's so interesting.
So trying to silence, try to insert it. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I love that idea. You could just see what a challenge that is to say, this is my number. Like, bite the inside of your lips to keep your mouth closed.
And I think so many of our students are sending these quotes via email sometimes. And so I think there's a temptation after less than 24 hours. They're like, I haven't heard from my client. Hey, it might actually be a very long, in that sense, period, but wait, I would say until a week's gone by, and then send a follow-up. Hey, just wanted to know if you had any questions. You don't start backpedaling, right? I mean,
don't negotiate with yourself. I remember recently I sent out a proposal on a Friday afternoon, and I said to my boyfriend and my daughter, who's in her 20s, it was too high. Should I send them an email and just say, it's negotiable? Like, I know those things, and I didn't. And Monday morning she goes, looks good to go. But so I think you're right. That silence is not just in person to person. It's also giving space, maybe make a rule around it. I send out an email with a proposal, and then I follow up, 3 days later, and this is my, cadence. And then you see what works and track that data and make that part of your kind of thing so that it takes away the emotion, the anxiety.
I love the way you frame that when you haven't heard back from them and you keep emailing them, you're negotiating with yourself. You're negotiating yourself down because there's nobody else in that conversation but you.
Yes.
That's so interesting. And it's the same thing, even if, you haven't heard back from them in your head, you're going, oh no, it was too much. And oh no, they hate me. Oh no, that's all kinds of assumptions that are based on nothing in reality. But you're not having conversation with them. You're not negotiating with them. You're negotiating with yourself. That's so interesting. I also think that it is very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very heartening to know that even someone who is a professional negotiator and who negotiates $8.6 million deals, and I'm sure well beyond that. Also for you still, there are moments when you have to go, no, stop, follow your own advice. You know how to do this.
Yeah. I always think about negotiations being kind of like weight loss. Like every January, there's a new silver bullet and we all fall for it. We're like, oh, I'm going to do it, and really when it comes down to it, it's hard work and eating right, and negotiation's the same way because it's a different scenario, different people, different points of leverage. And you're right. It can be, I will get on a call and I'll have to really be mindful about the strategies I use because your emotions or any kind of anxiety gets in the way. Research shows you get cloudy. It changes your view. Anything that you can do to objectify yourself is really the key. Don't make decisions when you're heightened, happy, sad, anxious, like how do you make decisions when you're as objective as you could be? And it's hard. It is. It's a work in progress. I'm not proud of some of the things that I do, but learning experience, moving forward, and just understanding that it's uncomfortable. How can I get the best out of it? And how can I reframe it better for myself.
Yeah, well, and I think that our emotions are so powerful that it almost feels like we have to do what our emotions tell us to do. You know, there's that I always say it, and I really mean to look up who said it first, but that don't believe everything you think. And I think that that's also true with your emotions. Don't believe every emotion you feel, and don't let every emotion drive. You know, we don't do that in well, I guess sometimes we do in daily life, but for some reason in business and in challenging scenarios, it's very tempting to be like, I feel this, and so I will do this. Whereas our rational mind might probably does know better. And our rational mind says, no, follow the rules. But we go, I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'm feeling afraid. And so I take this action. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if you can, like, just like we said, like those emotions when you're sending it out and waiting, it's the same thing when they come back and say yes. Don't just call them back right. Like if you allow yourself to celebrate, get excited, but go through that process and kind of allow yourself to come back down a little bit so that you can really think about, okay, is this price good? Is there anything else I need? Is timing, have we decided on timing? Like, so that you can still go back and say, great, I'm glad we're going to move forward. Let's talk about these things so that you don't leave something on the table that was really important to you because you're so excited. Let's go. You just, I'm so glad we're going to do this. And you just like get caught up in that, and not bad, but really objectifying the whole process.
Yeah. Well, and I think, there's certainly some clients that if you come back and you're like, yeah, I can't wait to get started. Woo, I'm so excited. I'm sure there's some clients that would be like, oh, that's adorable. But I'm also positive that there are other clients that would go, whoa, okay, wait a minute here.
Yeah.
Why is this such a big deal for you? Did we make a mistake with this person? Where they may not have it all. You're just actually excited, but kind of show your cards in that way may not be the wisest thing to do.
Yeah. And another key for business owners, and I'm sure you teach this too, is if you have a couple clients at once, it allows you to be more objective because it doesn't feel like you have to have that one. And even having a conversation rolling at the same time. So when I feel like, oh, that was too high, or, oh, I don't want to wait, I go into kind of sales mode and get some other conversations at least started. Because then it just feels like you have more leverage or you're less desperate. So whatever you can do, you just have to find your kind of thing that alleviates that anxiety for yourself.
Yeah. I think it's so important too, what you said earlier about timing too, because I think we think pricing is such a big deal in this world, and we get past that. And then we think, okay, no, we don't have to go negotiate for anything else. It's over. We're done. But there are those things, whether it is, for freelancer, the timeline of the project, if you happen to want to be going on staff, things like vacation time or other benefits. And so the timing is so, we forget that the client, they might say, here's what we want, but that doesn't mean we have to just say yes to that as well. Right.
Yeah. And also like that scope creep, that adds into that too, is like, at that moment, also saying, okay, so let's talk about who is my point of contact. When we get outside of scope, this is how I usually handle it. And having those conversations, that's a part of it too. They're all pieces of leverage so that you can just get it on the table. I love to just have everything figured out so that when those situations come up where, listen, hey, that's out of scope. This is how I handle it. It's not a big deal. I just send this amendment or whatever it is. And then we just go from there. And then it just doesn't become this icky conversation every single time. But going through those agreements that's a good time to do it when everybody's happy and before, the project starts.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's wise to just have your go-to, normally we don't talk about templatizing copy, but when it comes to talking with the client, knowing that you have a line that goes, I'd be happy to do that for you. Since that's outside the scope of this project, I'm going to have to work up a new quote. I'll get that to you by end of day or whatever. But so there's no like, oh, I really want this client. Should I just do it for them? Should I not?
Mhm.
But nope, this is my standard line. This is what I always send out. Yeah. Makes it so much
Yeah.
more comfortable.
Or taking credit for that. When you do give them something beyond you were, just say, hey, just so you know, that's normally X amount of money. And you can also inflate it because you're not negotiating the price,
Mhm.
and just say, but I'm going to do it for you because our partnership is really important to me, the longer term. So don't take advantage of something that you give them to. Don't downplay it. Really just say, I'm doing this for you. Make them feel good.
Yeah. Well, they're not going to know that it's something special if you tell them that it's something
Exactly.
special. They're not going to, they're not going to, well, and actually too, they're first of all, they're not going to know that it's something special if you don't mention it. But also if you don't mention it, they may think, oh, well, could we have gotten a lot more for the cost? If she's just throwing stuff on for free, could we have gotten a lot more in this original price? Did we get screwed over here?
Well, and the next time you bring it up too, I feel like if you just start adding things and they don't know, and then you continue working with them on another project, they're going to keep adding things and they don't know again. And so you're going to be frustrated that you did this free work and that relationship's not going to get any better. Right. And then I feel like if you bring it up later down the line, it's like, wait, but you just gave that to us all these past times that we worked together. So why is it suddenly coming up?
Yeah.
Months from now or whatever, however long the relationship is.
Yeah. And it may be no big deal to them.
Yeah.
And it may be a huge deal to you.
Yeah. I feel like that's often the case.
Yeah. I often think too, is it their money or is it the company's money? That really makes a difference too. Like it doesn't feel the same. So just having that awareness around their reality and what's important to them. And then that way you can come to the negotiation with those things and that awareness. They want to, because they want a partner at the end of the day that looks at it from all sides.
Yeah. Yeah. They're coming to you because they want whatever this project, they want it resolved. They want it off their plate. They want someone to take care of it. And they would, at least when I'm talking to a vendor, like I really want the first vendor to be the one.
Yes.
I don't want to have all the additional calls. So I would say often, unless you really mess up that initial call, people are predisposed to wanting to just hire you so they don't have to go through a whole list of people.
Yeah.
So to make it that much easier for them and be that partner, it makes it that much easier for them to say yes as well.
Yeah. And giving them the data or to your point, like saying, hey, just so you know, I also do this, or this isn't usually people that this service don't usually do this, but I always just do this, and this as additional, like maybe it's just the way you interact. Maybe it's a weekly update or, like something that is just part of what you do, but then helping them because they may have to sell it into their company. And then then they know they made the right choice. Cause you're right. They may have just wanted to go to the first person or, they really like you, but they need to do their due diligence. So help them do their due diligence a little and say, this is why I'm special.
I love that. Well, and we always talk about clients don't know how to be clients, right? They're kind of coming into this going, I don't really know what to do. So the more you can spell it out for them. And I love that saying that, I do this. A lot of other people don't do this, but I do this and I do this for this reason, makes your life easier, whatever. You're right. It makes it easier for them to sell you, get approval for you. But it also makes it that much easier for them to understand like, oh, this, because they're not going to know otherwise. They're not going to know whether it's standard to check in this number of times or whether it's not standard. So to actually call that out and say, here's what, even if it's something that is standard, but to just call it out and say, look, I do X, Y, Z, and here's how the process goes. And here's how I make it easy for you. Just makes it that much easier for you to get them to say yes. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. And even like, I just get so nerdy on all this, but like in those early conversations too, just saying, is this the first time, have you hired somebody in the past? Kind of understanding where they come at it so that you can give them more guidance and more around that. And even asking like, how are decisions made? Are you the decision maker? Do you have to get it approved? Otherwise, then there's more time that it takes to get your proposal approved. Just saying, do you have a regular budget for that? Just have that curiosity again. You never know. They might just come out and tell you, yep, we have a budget. It's quarterly. It's this amount.
Mhm.
I've had people do that. If you just ask, they tell you what you want. I'm like, okay, I'm going to come in just right.
Yeah, right.
You think about your number.
What a coincidence. That's right.
What a
That's
deal.
yeah. That's great. I love that. I feel like I'm saying I love that to everything because I'm really loving
yes,
the
we do.
conversation.
We're going to have to get Susie back is what I'm hearing.
Yes. No, I feel like we could talk for like hours and hours more, but of course I want to be respectful of your time as well. Is there any, how would you sum up the entire field of negotiation in one little line? No, but is there any maybe small tip for people to keep in mind? And we've covered a lot, so maybe it's even just something we've talked about, the practicing negotiation on a regular basis or asking the what if question. But is there kind of one thing that you often recommend people start with to get comfortable with negotiation?
Yeah, I have a framework, and I have a freebie that people can take away,
Yes.
and it's just a way of looking at it. So it's PACE. It's prepare, aware, close, and evaluate. And I say that because if you can look at negotiation in those parts and as a process, I have some tips on you prepare kind of like, oh, this is what I need to know. And then thinking about the awareness, am I going to be nervous? Or, like how are they going to be? Are they going to be kind of standoffish? Are they going to be quiet? Do I need to practice silence? Like just even thinking and rehearsing kind of that awareness and how you're going to feel in that moment and anticipating it. And then when they're ready, we tend to go, this is our whole proposal. I want to go through the whole thing, but they said yes at page 1 and we didn't hear them because we're so in our world. So knowing when to close and then always getting better. So taking the time to evaluate, they say the party that's prepared is the one that will win. And you are more likely to have success if you prepare 20% of the time. I mean, 20% of the time you'll have more success if you prepare, but same is true if you evaluate and get better. We tend to be like, we're done. Yeah. But if we can take the time to like, look at, okay, this was good. I practiced silence. I could get better. We're just going to continue to kind of go through that continuum of getting more comfort. So I like to think about it as a process, even just preparing for a conversation, whether you take, if it's high stakes, you take a lot of time, or just before you get on, what are the outcomes I'm looking for? What's going to feel like? What do I want to make sure I want to know after this call? Is just getting that mindset right. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it really does. I can't wait for our students or our listeners, followers, all that to get your freebie. So where can they find you? Where can they follow you? Where can they get that freebie? I know I'm going to download it myself right after this.
Well, I made it just to try to make it easy because I'm everywhere on social media, or mostly Instagram and LinkedIn. I'm big on LinkedIn just because of my audience. It's Susie Tomenchok, which is not an easy name to remember, even though it's Susie Tomenchok. But spelling can be challenging. So I have a URL, Negotiation Love. We want to fall in love with negotiation. Yes. And so that's where you can sign up for my regular newsletter and then just get that download of that framework. And then it has a prep sheet that is something you can think through before any negotiation that you have.
That is so cool. Yes. Negotiation Love. So head over there.
That'll be in our show notes too, for those, and in the YouTube description for those watching. Yeah. It'll be everywhere. So you can easily click on that.
Exactly. And then go follow Susie. And she obviously is a well of information. So, and to mix weird metaphors, you can tell this is only the tip of the iceberg. Very confusing, but I think we understand what I'm saying. She's got a lot to teach us all. So Susie, thank you so much for joining us today. This was super interesting. And yeah, as Kate was saying, think we're going to need to have you back on again as
Love
soon
it.
as we can.
I'd love it.
Yes. Thank
I
you
love
so much.
negotiation. So
Thank
I'd
you.
love to help. So it was my pleasure.
Yay.
Thank you.
Excellent. I was going to say, I hope this has been helpful, but you know what, guys, I know this one was helpful.
Yeah.
And so we hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we did, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching. Make sure you don't miss any tips, tools, or tactics for copywriters by clicking subscribe right now. And of course, you can always find us over at filthyrichriter.com. We'll see you next time.